The Chihigu Community School was established by Ibis Ghana, an NGO operating in the northern region, but was later handed over to the community. To help sustain the school and provide education for their children, the community took over the provision of teachers for the school.
4, 5. It's not your regular school where you have a teacher who takes care of students. We are the Chihigu DA Primary School in the Northeast Gonja district of the Savannah region. Here, a P3 student who is smart and can take care of the others is the one teaching from nursery to P1.
The community say they have made efforts to get the government support the school with teachers, but to no avail. Haruna Mohammed is one of the brilliant students in the school, and so he has a responsibility to teach his younger ones.
Haruna Mohammed is the teacher for the pre-primary school. He takes care of these children.
My teacher is not in school today because he is sick, so I am now teaching the KG and P1. We in the upper primary do not have classes because the teacher is sick.
For the upper primary, today is a holiday because their teacher is indisposed.
This is the class 3 and 4. On a normal day, the students would have been studying here, but they are absent. They are outside there playing. Why? Because there's no teacher to help them.
A lecturer and philanthropist at the Tamale Technical University, Mohammed Dawuni, has recruited a teacher to support the school. But as fate will have it, the teacher is currently indisposed.
How did you get connected to this school?
Oh, I'm actually a lecturer in Tamale Technical University, and farming is my hobby. So I made a small farm here as my Saturday activities. But it happens during our vacation. I passed here during school days, and I saw the place was locked down. So I inquired from the elders, and it was that there was no teacher. So initially when I asked, they said Ibis established the place, managed it for a while, and then they asked that they should take over after they handed over. They couldn't fulfill the terms between the teachers, and the teachers had to run away. So I actually inquired if those teachers were still free. They introduced me to 2 of them. In fact, they were still free. So I inquired if Ibis' condition is fully met. They were willing to come back, and they did say yes.
But the public relations officer of the Northeast Gonja District Education Directorate, Idris Ibn, said they have written to the GES in Accra to help absorb the school and support the school with teachers, but they are expecting the response in September.
So the community, they came with the former assembly member, make the request, and then the unit committee members. 3 communities came. The Chihigu, Alhaji Rijana is a Fulani community, so closer to Chihigu. Then there's also another community along the Libi Road, Nomna Yele. So currently we have these 3 communities schools which has been submitted. I even have the letter in my phone which has been currently written approval, and hopefully these community schools will be absorbed and approved from the 2024-2025 academic year, and that will be this year, somewhere between September to October.
Welcome back on the AM show. We are talking about education, and the video you just watched, quite disheartening that students do not have teachers. I don't know how they will be able to manage to learn anything. But we are joined on the phone and via Zoom by Mr. Divine Kpe, who's a Senior Programs Officer at Africa Education Watch. Thank you so much, Mr. Divine Kpe, for joining us. We also have Mr. Peter Anti, who's the Executive Director of Institute of Education Studies. He's joining us via phone. Mr. Peter Anti, thank you so much for joining us for the conversation this morning. Now, I don't know if you watched the video, but what are your initial thoughts? It's 2024, and after a series of articles and news stories on schools under trees and how, education is being affected, we still have such a situation here in the Gonja East District. What are your initial thoughts? Let me start with you, Mr. Pitanti.
Thank you very much. And good morning to your viewers, and good morning to my brother. I think that this speaks to a bigger problem of educational planning in our system. I think that anytime we speak about or we have a discussion on schools under siege and then schools of shame, as you normally do on your network, I just go back to the data to see whether we have enough information to communicate to us that there is a particular problem at this particular district. And of course, if you look at the data, it clearly shows that there are challenges with school infrastructure in the district in its entirety. So we have not had enough focus in terms of planning with the data that we've been collecting from the various schools. And that is why in 2024, you have schools that do not have teachers at all. It also speaks to the challenge of how we set up schools. Okay, so if I got the documentary right, this school was started by an NGO or a particular institution or company, and when they ended their benevolence to the society, or when they folded up, the school is now in serious problem. So what the general question that normally ask is, what is the role of the district education office in the setup of the school? What has the assembly been doing throughout the establishment of the school? What is the report that the school executive officer for that particular district, what report has he or she been sending to the district office in terms of this particular school? These are questions that we need to answer if we really want to solve some of these problems. Because, of course, you cannot sometimes blame the headquarters, I mean the ministry or the Ghana TV service for some of this, because they take information from the ground. And if the data that I looked at last night is anything to go by, these are information that have been sent to the Ministry of Education, these are information that have been sent to the Ghana Education Service. So they look at the data, they should know that there is a particular challenge of teacher shortage or lack of teachers in this particular district, and specifically in this school. And then they could have easily set in to address the problem. So it's to a broader problem of lack of planning and not paying attention to the data that we have been collecting in terms of our school infrastructure and school human resources in general.
Dr. Ansi, you asked a lot of questions that you said we need to find answers to. Who do we pose these questions to? In the video, we saw that they said they'd written to the Ministry of Education and they'll get a response in September. Who do we direct these questions to give us the appropriate answers?
So the first point, of course, should be the district education office. In the district education office is the school inspectorate officer. The school inspectorate officer should have an idea of what the state of each school under his jurisdiction is. So he should be the first point of call. Then the district education officer, officers in the district education should have an idea of the state of the schools under their supervision. Then if they really indicate or so, but I know because the data that I have looked at indicates that this kind of challenge is prevalent in this particular district. So I will now escalate this particular question to the headquarters of Ghana Education and the Ministry of Education, because the data shows that these schools have problems with teachers. If you look at their teacher-teaching ratio, it is nothing to write home about. So it's clear that this particular district have problems with teacher deployment, teacher distribution. What has been done about it?
Please hold for me. Let me go to Mr. Divine Kpe now, who's a Senior Programs Officer for Africa Education Watch. Mr. Divine Kpe, what are your initial thoughts on the situation?
All right, thank you for having me, and good morning to viewers, as well as my brother, Peter. I'm not surprised that we still have schools that are not having teachers or having adequate teachers. Because clearly we know that one of the challenges with our educational system is the issue of teacher deployment and teacher retention. So GES has been working to come up with a framework on how to effectively deploy teachers and then also how to retain them. Over the years, I don't know the progress of that framework, but I know within the last few 4 to 5 years, there have been attempts to ensure that, especially the underserved district, the 75 underserved districts, as far as GES categorization is concerned, there have been attempts by GES to improve teacher deployment to such districts where there are acute teacher shortage. But the challenge is even much more beyond just deployment. If we deploy teachers today and they go to such underserved districts, trust me, the maximum time to stay there is about 1 to 2 years. So their retention in such communities where there are such deplorable conditions, the mean of transportation is poor, accommodation is poor, basic facilities and amenities are not available. If we deploy them even right now, it will take a very shorter time for them to leave such environments. So the problem is not even about teacher shortage. We have enough teachers. If we want to effectively redeploy our teachers, such environments will get teachers and with teachers with the student. But it is broadly about the environment that the teachers are posted to. So beyond this particular documentary or this school, which is not yet a GES school, beyond that, the schools that are GES school, where GES deploy teachers to, the teachers do not stay in such an environment for too long. And so we continue to see this instance of teacher shortage in such environments. They stay there 1 or 2 years and then they are leaving. So for me, it is broadly about taking the bull by the horn, identify the root cause, and then tackling from that. And as far as I'm concerned, it is about the working condition, more especially when it comes to accommodation and transportation in those environments. So I heard the assurance from the district GSPRO that who spoke in the documentary that the next academic year, the school will be absorbed. That's a good news. But beyond the absorption, where teachers will be posted to the school, there is a need for us to have a broader conversation that if the teachers are posted to such schools, they can retain them for a very long time. And that brought us to the very point of how we have a medium to a long-term plan to ensure that basic facilities like accommodations and means of transportation are available for teachers to be able to commute to school in those environments, stay in the environment and then commute to school. Otherwise, even if we absorb that particular school today and deploy teachers today, we'll still come back in the next 1 or 2 years to talk about teachers leaving the school or the teachers not being adequate. But again, it also has to be that we need to have a conversation about how organizations set up schools and then they probably leave the school without any proper exit or transitional plan. If they are having to intervene, which of course is a good intervention, really, because government alone cannot set up all the schools across the country. So there's a need for us to have organizations, faith-based organizations or civil societies, as well as any individual or corporate Ghana providing the intervention. But if they want to manage the schools themselves, there's a need for them to have a transition plan, or if they know that it is a project and they are going to exit one day and then the school will have to be managed by somebody else, part of their plan will be to have an exit plan, and how that exit plan includes the transition of the school from them to the government. It's very important. For me, it looks like this particular NGO did not have any plan in place to ensure that there's a smooth transition of the school from them to the government. That's why we have seen this particular school being without teachers over the years, because government has not absorbed them. And there are similar schools across, especially in the northern part of the country, where there are a lot of individuals and their NGO interventions in provision of school. So it's very important that NGOs and any individual, if they feel that they want to manage the school for a time before they transition into government, it's very important that their part of their plan includes the transitional plan, and that comes with a consensual building with the GS, that when they are exiting, GS is coming in at a go without any vacuum created, as we have seen here, where there's a vacuum of teacher shortage and then teaching and learning not going before the next academic year before GES will absorb and begin to post teachers to the environment. So, Honorable, I'm not surprised that we have this situation. There's a clear conversation that we need to have on retaining teachers in our underserved districts beyond deploying them.
Well, like you rightly said, this is not... well, let me just start by saying that this is not a situation only in Chihigu. This is a national problem. I know many teachers. I myself, I went to University of Education whenever, but I do not want to be in the classroom because the environment, the condition is not conducive. And a lot of these teachers end up, emigrating to other countries to go and teach there, where they have fairly or, relatively more better conditions of service. But the issue here is, you mentioned that the GES and the Ministry of Education are making some attempts to curb the situation. If it's a situation of recruitment and retention, then these conversations that you're saying we should have, where do we start from so that we find a one-stop, solution, long-term solution to these problems without having to come back to this every month or so, shedding light on schools that are not doing so well. And these NGOs identified a gap. If there were schools in these communities, they wouldn't have come to set up these schools. So we cannot also fault them for not, yes, there are proper ways that they could have transitioned these schools into the hands of GES. But the question is, where do we start that conversation from, with who? And how do we ensure that, we curb this nip it in the bad once and for all?
All right. Like I mentioned, this is a medium to a long-term interventions that the government would have to deploy, because issue of retaining teachers it's not a one-day job. Over the years, we will having this conversation, and we are in 2024. We are still here about teachers remaining in the classroom. If you look at the collective agreement the government has signed with teachers or GES workers in entirety, you have realized that even part of that provision is to ensure that there is something to retain the teachers over there. But generally, we do not have the political commitment to ensure the implementation of that particular framework. So yes, even as I mentioned earlier, that GS is having or developing a framework on how to deploy teachers and then how to retain them. It is not enough if we do not have the commitment to ensure that, one, we improve accommodation situations in the communities over there. So too often classrooms are cited in such communities, and you know that the distance from the nearest community to the school is quite a lot for a teacher to commute. But we do not have, as part of the plans in building the school or siting the school, to attach one of few classroom units to the school, and then teachers are to come there and struggle on themselves to get accommodation. And then after struggling to get accommodation, now they have to also find their way to commute the long distances to the school. Even if you look at GS own provision, the school is supposed to be sited within 3 to 5 kilometers radius of distance from the child's home. And that is fair enough. But when it comes to the teachers mostly, where they get accommodation and before they commute to the school, it's much more away than the 3 to 5 kilometers that we even talk about. So it's very important that as part of plans in improving teacher retention in such and that sub-district, this is not a national thing we need to do. This is just a targeted environment where there are teacher shortages. And of course,
this situation is all over the country. It's not just one community that you focus on. No. Like you said, it's all over the country, hidden in communities that you and I will probably never, enter.
Yeah, my point is that when I'm talking about providing accommodation units for teachers, it is not a national thing to be done, but a targeted environment where we know that the northern part of our country are underserved when it comes to educational facilities. Then a framework and targets addressing the situation in those areas, not about saying we are having a national framework that provide accommodation units for teachers in the country entirely. No, but targeted at environment where teachers can have accommodation to stay, and then there can be a framework on how their transportation can also improve. There are best practices that we can learn from other countries like Mozambique, that is also providing some intervention for teachers in underserved districts or rural areas to be able to stay. They provide allowance for them, hardship allowance for them. They provide they subsidize their accommodation. If the government cannot provide accommodation for them, at least they subsidize accommodation for them so that they can they can stay in the community over there to teach. And then also when it comes to issues of transportation, there's a means of subsidizing their costs so that they can be able to transport themselves to school. So we can learn best practices. It's not that we don't have best practices across the country. There are that as much as our policymakers are globetrotting, attending beautiful international education summits and meetings. It's very important that we borrow. There's no need. We may not have to develop from the scratch our own intervention. There are several examples that we could just adopt and then adapt to suit our situation. So that conversation starts about us knowing that we have a whole lot of situation in our underserved districts when it comes to teacher retention, and the problem is not about deploying them. No, that is not the problem. If deployment would have just transferred teachers there and ends it. No, that is not a problem. How we are going to retain them, that is the problem. And the retention will mean that we need multi-stakeholder approach where several units come on board. The district assembly, per the Education Act, which also has some management responsibility over our basic education. What role can they play when it comes to accommodation provision for teachers and transportation provision for teachers? Then when it comes to government, how can government also come with its subsidies, or government play fidelity to the promises that they made to such teachers in the underserved district? If you put in collective agreement that you give this allowance to teachers in such environments, and yet you are not committed to it, I don't think when the teachers are leaving, we can fault them at all. The government is also to play fidelity to its own commitment that I want to subsidize or provide allowance to pushing you in such environment. I'm sure some teachers will be retained in such an environment. So we need a whole lot of approaches from the approach of the government, and also we come to the district level, who has a responsibility over our basic school, and also the interventions that they can provide. And then our community-based organizations and field-based organizations equally have some level of responsibility. Because I look at it over the years, you have known that when it comes to educational infrastructure provision at the basic education level, about 80% of what we have were provided by the faith-based organization, the Christian-based organization and the Muslim-based organization.
And all, yeah.
They provided such infrastructure, and they were provided by the yesteryear churches and then the mosques who are not richer, or who were not richer than our churches today and our mosques today. Sadly, our churches and mosques that are richer than the yesteryear churches, we see little intervention from them. I'm not saying we should shift responsibility of infrastructure provision to citizens or faith-based organizations. And government does nothing, not at all. But I strongly believe that their intervention over the years has helped a lot, and we still believe that their intervention is very important to ensure that we address the significant gap in our educational space. Because for me, where I sit, if we want to rely on government forever, we will continue to sing the same chorus over and over and over. That is why even when we are talking about the infrastructure challenges in our schools, the deficits, what we are doing currently is to continue to mount pressure on government to address this challenge. We are also adopting a way to ensure that we mobilize resources at the local level. So currently we are engaging the district assemblies, some selected district assemblies, where our project will be piloted, to develop a framework to see how we mobilize resources at the grassroots level. Say we identify Adenta municipality. So we have a framework where Adenta municipality is able to identify the corporate entities in their environment, the faith-based organizations in their municipality, the NGOs and individuals that are there, and see how they have education plan, share with them that this is what we have for this year. What are the interventions you can bring on board? What can you provide for us to address? If they are able to mobilize resources at those levels, they can address to some extent the challenges they have. So it's very important that we also address the challenges from the local governance level before we even will be able to come to the national level. Because too often the national government, as far as the education resource is concerned, it is overburdened, and I don't see the national government addressing our educational infrastructure challenges in the very shortest possible time if we do not innovative and radical approach at the local government level.
Okay, so when you say, just to clarify, when you say you're mounting pressure, you mean the Africa Education Watch, right?
Yes.
So in this case, this pressure that you're mounting, has it beared any fruit yet? Has it bore any fruit?
Oh, yes, you would have noticed that our work broadly focuses on ensuring that government improves resource allocation to education, specifically basic education. So we have been talking about government ensuring equity approach when it comes to resource distribution to the education sector. Too often we see resources shifting from the basic education sector going to other subsectors, which of course is very important that we address the issues over there. But for the very fact that the basic level has much of the challenges, if we want to adopt equity approach, it means that basic education will have to have chunk of the money to address their challenges. So our advocacy in the last 3 to 4 years has been to ensure that government improves resource allocation to education service delivery at the basic education level when it comes to infrastructure. And yes, it is yield some results. For instance, when it comes to the capitation grants, previously we were not having in the budget a budget line created for capitation grant. You won't see government's budget and see that this is capitation grant budget line. Not at all. But our engagement with the Ministry of Finance, proud to the finalization of the 2024 budget, we continue to make the case that capitation grant in its entirety needs to be improved. The entire amount needs to be allocated to the schools, and then also there's a need for us to have a line that we can monitor the distribution and then also the disbursements of the fund.
Right.
So that we're glad when we saw that the 2024 budget carried that component of capitation grant. And for the very first time since the capitation grant was increased to 10 Ghana cedis per student per year, we've seen that the full amount has been allocated, I think about 84 million Ghana cedis. Last year it was 11 million Ghana cedis against a conservative estimate of 80 million. So for this year, we've seen the full allocation in the both capitation grant and the base grant. And our work this year is to ensure that government does not only allocate, but actually disperse the entire amount to the Ministry of Education, and the Ministry of Education also ensuring that the budget execution improves where all the money actually is good. And when it comes to infrastructure, okay.
So what happens to these children as we speak? What can you do for them? Where do they go from here?
All right. For me, I'm glad that we have heard that the next academic year, which I think will take effect from September, the PRO for the district mentioned that government is going to absorb that school and make available teachers to the school. That is good news.
But that's in September, so they have to wait from now till September to get help. Is that what you're saying?
No, that's not what I mean.
Okay.
But what I'm saying, there's a hope that something is being done in the very long term. At least government is finally going to absorb the school, and then the situation is going to be addressed. However, as the government itself is watching this documentary, we cannot wait till September. There's a need for us to provide a stopgap intervention. And I strongly believe redeploying teachers at this particular time will inconvenience the teachers themselves. So it's not something that's been done. So there's a vacancy. So at the middle of the academic year, we are sending you here, we are sending you here, we are sending you here. I don't see it happening at the broader national level, but at the community level, the community can provide a stopgap intervention. And I'm glad that the man you interviewed was providing that intervention where they want to help some teachers to be assisting these students in the interim. So it's very important that we, as community and the district assembly, find a means of engaging some people who will provide an interim intervention for these students until we ensure that government in the next academic year adequately facility or put provisions in place to ensure that trained and well-qualified teachers are posted to the area.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kpe. Mr. Kpe is a Senior Programs Officer at Africa Education Watch. This is still the AM show. We are not done. We'll take a break, and when we return, there's more.